It was an early start on Saturday the 21st of August 2004 for my good friends Eileen and Richard and I as we set off on the famous Yorkshire Three Peaks walk. We had recorded our 7:30 start time on a slip of paper and dropped it into the letterbox at the little cafe in Horton in Ribblesdale, then immediately encountered a fellow walker who offered to take our photograph as we stood outside the cafe. The previous evening had seen an early retirement to bed for me, in the hope of a good night's sleep before what I had gathered would be a gruelling test of stamina, so I was taking no chances. I later asked Richard how he had prepared for the walk.
Well, I didn't do anything especially to prepare for the walk, apart from Friday night when I didn't have any beer because I didn't want to feel too rough in the morning. So I just kept off the beer Friday night and packed everything I could think of into my bags and not particularly even had an early night. Went quite late to bed and just that's how I prepared for the next day.
As a regular walker, I'd always wanted to have a go at this famous route. I'd been very close to joining other people who did it, but never quite had the confidence to do it. That is, until Eileen, Richard and I made a definite decision to go for it. I asked Eileen why she wanted to attempt it.
Well, because I'd felt that if I left it any longer I wouldn't do it. I almost felt I should have done it 10 years earlier. So, time was trotting on, better get it done.
Finally getting on our way from the cafe in Horton was a real buzz. At last I was starting the Three Peaks walk. I wondered how Richard was feeling at that moment.
Well, I was feeling pretty good actually. I was ready for off, and so I think everybody else was as well. I was confident, everybody was confident, and we went.
The morning was glorious, and we stepped forward with optimism. The distant view of Ingleborough, the third and final peak on our journey, teased us as we plodded up the path to Pennygent, mountain number 1. We reached the top in very good time, along with quite a crowd of other peakers.
We got up to the trig points, and there again we had our photos taken up there. All three of us were in good spirits, very high spirits, and we were doing okay. We were very confident that we were going to succeed.
I asked Eileen to recall how she felt at that moment.
Well, great actually, because the weather was fantastic that day. It was just beautiful. And then there was a real crowd of gathering up there. Sort of felt a bit elated. The views were lovely.
It was a bit of a surprise to see so many people gathered at the summit. What did Richard think of them all?
Well, I did wonder whether they were all going to do the Three Peaks. Some obviously were, because I think we chatted to some. They too, everybody on the first peak looked very happy and very confident. Now, whether that stayed with them through the walk, I don't know.
With sights firmly set on Whernside in the distance, we descended Pennygent to tackle the longest part of the walk.
It was a long walk, and we could see the Ribblehead viaduct in the distance, and it never seemed to get any closer. I was a little bit concerned because we were going to walk originally across a bog, but David was talking to the chap in the shop, and he diverted us round the bog.
David, we got some information before that it would have been wise to avoid that boggy ground because it had been a very wet week. And so these guys, they looked as if they were from the army more or less. They all headed for this boggy ground and we went another way. So we were very lucky we didn't hit anything bad. And then we met them coming off the field and they were clotted up to the waist, which was made me feel a bit gleeful because we looked all calm and collected. And we said, oh, we've just walked round the other way. And they said, oh, well, we've gone the quick way. I says, I can see that. Then they trotted off to Ribble Head, which by then was probably about another 4 miles along. I think we saw them again at Ribble Head.
The morning wore on and we continued apace, although this section did begin to get a bit of a trudge.
Well, we could see the Ribblehead Viaduct coming closer and closer, and I was thinking this is a long walk along this bit here, and I'll be glad when it's over. And I know that when we get to Ribblehead, we might just be able to have a pot of tea there and a bit of a rest.
Thankfully, we reached the refreshment van park not far from Ribblehead Viaduct. I, for one, was glad of a sit down and some food.
Well, I think at that particular time I thought we'd done very well. I thought we was making good time. Everybody was in good spirits. I didn't see any problems arising at that point, and we were all sat down having a nice cup of tea.
Well, I think we'd done probably about 12.5 miles then. I knew about it, but I'd been walking in Wellingtons and I'd got my proper walking boots in my rucksack. I put clean socks on, new walking boots, all nicely polished and clean and cool. So that was great. That was like a fresh start again.
I personally was okay, and I think everybody else was okay at that time as well.
I think we stopped at least 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes. And, you know, we really did recuperate there.
Unfortunately, on the ascent of Whernside, a build-up of clouds resulted in a sudden downpour of heavy rain, just as we crossed the Settle to Carlisle Railway near to Bleemore Tunnel. A bad decision on my part not to quickly put on waterproof clothing resulted in a good soaking, which would lead to serious foot problems later in the day.
It started and I was soaking wet through before I could put my waterproofs on, and I wasn't happy about that. My shorts were wet, my t-shirt was wet, and it made walking very uncomfortable, and I was hoping that it was going to stop raining very soon so it could all dry out.
The rain had sort of like just dipped our spirits down a little bit, and we really got a bit soaked, and it was cooler up there, so we just reached a bit of a dip because we knew we had another to go down the other side, and then we'd another hill after that. It just started pulling on us really from when we got up there. Yeah, we'd really started realising the enormity of the length of the walk.
By the time we reached the summit of Whernside, the rain had stopped, and we saw the clouds moving away to the south, so that we had wonderful clear views to the north, to the west, and particularly towards Ingleborough, our next and final peak.
Whernside, the second peak, we were there. I was very happy, apart from being a little bit wet and uncomfortable. But we made it, and I thought we were still in very good time. Within the 12 hours, we could do it.
I thought, well, we're going to do it. I think the timing might have worried me a little bit at that stage, actually. Not my physical well-being, but the timing. Yeah.
Yeah, looking towards Ingleborough from Whernside, it certainly looked a long walk, although we was all in good spirits still, and the time was good. Little did we know that after that, the time would seem to go very quickly after that.
It was on the descent of Whernside that I became aware of painful blisters beginning on the soles of my feet, probably caused by my boots getting a soaking during the downpour, as water ran down my bare legs and into my socks. Little did I know just what a problem this was going to be. The next stage of the walk was going to be a big challenge for me.
Well, we'd walked from Whernside to Chapel de Dale, and that's where David was starting to have a little bit of trouble with his feet. So we stopped briefly there just to assess the situation. He had blisters on his feet, which was not good, and we'd all decided beforehand that if one give in, then we'd all have to give in, which would have been a little bit disappointing, but that's what we'd agreed. Fortunately, David carried on a little bit further to the actual Ingleborough ascent up Ingleborough. There again, we stopped for a little while because he was in real pain, and it was touch and go whether we were going to carry on or not.
David didn't know they was up to it, and so we stopped and David said he'd have some more sausage rolls and a drink, and then he'd make his decision after that. And if he couldn't go, we were all going to pull off, but there was a little eke of disappointment. I hoped that he could manage it. And then David ate his sausage rolls, and the decision was made. We're going for it. And we knew that once we got up there, we had to go down anyway, so we had to finish the walk.
Eileen herself seems to suffer from a little bit of height problems, so we just had to jolly along a little bit to get her to the top. But we all made it, and we was glad when we got to the top.
When I'm tired, I worry about the heights because I suffer with vertigo. When it comes to ledges, it puts a terrible fear in me. Vertigo kicked in, and I just froze. I couldn't move. And Richard must have realised he'd disappeared. Then he put his head down, and "Are you all right?" And I just said, I couldn't speak. I just had to nod my head and with a negative no. And of course a little tear came. There was no noise, but it did. I was in the state. Great, he came down like, my hero, and he got my hand and he yanked me up.
Not wishing to let my friends down, I managed to find the strength to go on, and despite crippling pain in my feet, joined Eileen and Richard at the top of Ingleborough.
Absolutely fantastic. It was a lovely evening. I walked along to the cairn, looked towards Morecambe Bay, and you could see the sea glittering in the sun. It was an absolutely fantastic sight. I never thought you would be able to see the sea from so far inland, and to see Morecambe Bay and the sea was absolutely fantastic.
We were elated that we were up there. I was a little bit concerned in my mind that I was going to have to go down some more of these really drastic ledges, but it didn't turn out like that. It was gradual. But we thought we were nearly running down, but people were actually overtaking us, and that was the biggest surprise to all of us, that we felt we were striding out like giants, but we must have been so exhausted that we weren't going that quickly after all.
We were all quite amazed at how long it had taken us to reach the top of our last peak. I believe it was about 5:30 when we began the descent and the long trudge back to Horton. To be awarded the Three Peaks certificate, we had to be back at the cafe to clock off by 7:30. It was becoming a race against time.
Coming down from Ingleborough and looking along to Penigent, it looks so far away. It was just I couldn't believe that it looked so far away. I didn't think we were going to make it in time now, because we were running, because we'd been held up, and we'd have to really march on now to complete it within the 12 hours. But we'll give it a try.
Didn't seem to be coming any nearer. We were putting all the effort in, but the terrain is such that you're walking on these areas and you can't see Horton, and then you think, well, just over this one it'll be there, and then you go over another one, and then you walk on another plane and you still can't see. And we were doing this, and it was wearying, because we knew we were on deadline. We felt we're not gonna do it in the 12 hours.
Thinking we had no chance of completing the walk within the 12 hours, we headed to Horton and the cafe with heavy hearts.
When we got to the shop and looked through the window and realised that we was still in time, I was totally gobsmacked is probably the word, I don't know.
So we rang the bell, and the guy came, and we nearly shoved him out the way to get to the clock.
David running, clocked off. I didn't realise that I had to clock off as well, so I just stood around there like nothing were happening. Then he says, you better clock off, and Eileen had better clock off as well.
We knew that we got there with just on the minute. So that's when I feel elated now, because we were so elated then.
I was so elated. I don't think I felt tired or anything like that. I know I was, but I was so chuffed that we'd done it within the 12 hours. It was totally incredible.
And then he brought these great big mugs of tea. So it was fantastic, but what a wonderful feeling that we'd actually done it to the minute. That was real good luck, wasn't it?
It was an incredible feeling knowing we had done it, but only just in 12 hours. But I was totally exhausted, and the pain from my blistered feet actually made me feel ill. Eventually, after our much needed mugs of tea, we returned to the car, where I had a short lie down before attempting to drive home. This had been the high point of my walk in life. I had for a long time wished to tackle the Three Peaks, and I'd done it, with a certificate and a badge to prove it. But I could not have achieved it without the help, support and comradeship of my dear friends Eileen and Richard. Some time after the walk, I asked Richard what effect it had had on him.
What effect has it had on me? I want to do more. I want to do more. Since then, I have actually done the Romball Stride with some of the PMT walkers, and actually gone up Snowdon as well.
When David and I started the walking group, because we were the founder members with one or two others, in a way we started on the group on the pretext of doing the Three Peaks over 10 years ago, because we used to talk about it going swimming. So it was the thing we talked about, and it took us 10 years to do it. So it's never too late, that's what I say.
I think Richard's final comment about the day sums it up perfectly.
No, it was just a very good day out, that's all.
That's it.